Hi, and welcome back to Hill and Ponton Social Security Disability Blog. I'm Natalia Jofre, the Social Security Section Director.
And I'm Shelly, the Senior Social Security Attorney.
So we're talking about listings. Our last blog, we specifically spoke about the PTSD listing, or at least the listing that can be applied and used for PTSD, and we got into some specifics about that. And now you're going to actually give us a case example, which I love because that's how you see how this gets applied. Maybe you can feel identified or not, but obviously we never share client names or anything like that, but just this case scenario.
Okay. So we've had so many, we have so many veteran clients, and we obviously love our veteran clients, but this case specifically is still an ongoing case, but it just shows sometimes how in application things don't go the way that we would expect them to.
Mm-hmm.
But we had a client who was 38-year-old Army veteran. He served from 1997 to 2001, and then again from 2004 until mid-year 2016. He had more than 5 combat deployments during that time period. He was in Afghanistan for 2 times. He was in Iraq 3 times. He was in Kosovo once. In 2015, he started experiencing PTSD symptoms while he was on active duty, and he began getting treatment for that. He was found unfit for service in the middle of 2016, and he was discharged from the United States Army. He was not retired. He was about 15 years in or so, but
Wow.
He was discharged, and he went straight into an inpatient treatment for PTSD. He did about 6 weeks inpatient, came out, and believe he ended up going into another inpatient after that. And then basically we had his Social Security hearing.
Wow.
So if we try to do an analysis of the 12.15, there's obvious exposure to actual death, threatened death. He was having a lot of re-experiencing. There was a lot of nightmares. There were a lot of triggers. There was a lot of hypervigilance. The claimant really couldn't function to care for himself and his own needs, much less function in any kind of capacity working.
Right.
I mean, he had just left the Army in 2016.
When you're talking about, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
When you're talking about not being able to take care of his own needs, just so that people understand. So, because Social Security is going to ask you about that. So you're talking about personal hygiene, being like either forgetting or deliberately not showering or not having the desire to shower, brush teeth, comb hair, right? That kind of just personal self-care.
Right.
And then it can also be applied to activities of daily living, like they won't cook for themselves, or they won't clean their house. They won't do laundry. They'll stay in the same clothes for a week at a time, or they'll just eat, open a can of soup. And like I've had clients, they'll tell me that like they won't even heat it up. Like it's just a function to eat. So is that what you're talking about in terms of?
Yeah, absolutely. And just generally not being able to stay even as far as their mood and the stability of their mental health goes. Unable to leave the house, unable to drive themselves somewhere, unable to walk into a supermarket or a store where there's multiple people, anything like that is definitely going to come into play. In this case particularly, we had a hearing. The hearing, we had asked for a medical expert testimony. I felt that the client by far met the PTSD listing if it was made for anyone. And we went to the hearing, and there was no medical expert at the hearing, and the case was denied. And so that case is on appeal right now to the Appeals Council. But it's not our first case that we've appealed with the almost same exact scenario and procedural history.
Right.
And I will say that now we have at least 5, if not more, that are probably around the federal appeal level or coming back down.
That's just insane. Like, to me, it's crazy that someone would be admitted for periods of 6 weeks at a time, inpatient. I mean, that's pretty significant. I mean, you're talking about this person who's basically been in a mental institution, for the lack of a better term, for those prolonged periods of time, and for them to then not be approved, is it just based on the judge's determination? I mean, because the medical evidence is there.
Right. And if there would have been a medical expert in this case, they would have absolutely approved it and said they met the listing, I believe, because just reading the listing, I mean, you can apply it.
Almost word for word, where you're like looking at this
Seriously.
chronology and you're going, this applies, this
Right.
applies.
You wrote it specifically for him. It does come down to the judge, and in this case specifically, the judge seemed to have absolutely no understanding of military culture. But regardless of that, they didn't apply the law correctly. That's for sure. So it does most definitely come down to the judge. And in a lot of cases, what we're seeing is, I don't want to say that it's systematic or anything like that. I'm definitely not. But in a lot of cases, I see where veterans are 100% service connected by the VA. Sometimes there tends to be a kind of where the judges will deny the case with almost a mentality of possibly this person's already being compensated for their disabilities, so maybe they don't need to
No double dipping.
Yes,
that term is becoming very well known, because we hear a lot about no double dipping.
Right.
So they're feeling like the VA is already paying you, I don't want Social Security to pay you too.
Right. And I don't know if that's the reason for a lot of the denials that we get, but we do get a number of denials for veterans that are 100% service connected that could clearly meet or equal the PTSD listing or any other listing for that matter. And we do appeal those, and we do appeal them to the federal court, just to kind of get it on somebody's radar that it's happening kind of frequently.
Right.
To see if that might create some type of change, because the reality is that the systems are they're different. Receiving VA compensation, especially service connected, should have absolutely no effect on your ability or inability to recoup from Social Security disability.
They're two different programs.
Absolutely.
You're paid into both separately. Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
That's a lot all at once, but
wow. But no, I mean, and I would think that case is unfortunately an example of what shouldn't happen, because technically speaking, and I'm sure going into that hearing, your expectation was that he was going to get approved.
Absolutely. I didn't expect it to have to go to a hearing. To give you the flip side.
Yeah, he shouldn't have even had to go to a hearing. I mean,
it's
honestly, right.
If I were a judge, or the flip side of that is I had a client recently, and same scenario, very close to the same scenario. And the judge in the hearing read through the PTSD listing for 12.15. He actually did not use a medical expert, but he actually concluded in the hearing himself that it was clear that the client met the listing, and he was approved. So like Natalia said, it really does come down to the judge on a lot of cases.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But once again, thank goodness they have you there to advocate for them, and that know the law and how it should be applied. And at least there was the recourse to go to the appeals council, and hopefully they'll either remand the case or maybe even in a case that's this black and white, man, you kind of hope that they just award it and not make them wait anymore.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you have any questions or concerns you'd like to discuss with us, please feel free to call our office or visit our website.
Thank you.